The road to Daryawala village was silent, except for the sound of wind brushing through dry corn stalks. The moon hung low, pale and dull, casting a cold light over the dirt track. Beyond the fields, scattered huts stood like tired memories, their walls cracked, their lamps dim. Arif walked home from the small grain mill where he worked part-time, his shoulders heavy with fatigue. He was not a man of great means or ambitions, just another villager who believed in quiet living. But that night, even the quiet felt wrong. The crickets had stopped chirping. The air was too still, as if holding its breath at the edge of the path. He saw something unusual, a motorcycle lying on its side, half in the mud, its back wheel slowly spinning. He paused, confused. No one ever rode this road after sunset. It was said to be cursed since the night a land dispute turned bloody 2 years ago. Arif hesitated, then stepped closer. The headlight flickered weakly, illuminating something dark near the front tire. A boot. Then another. His stomach twisted. A man lay face down in the dirt. Motionless, Arif's instinct screamed at him to turn away. But something stronger, curiosity, or maybe guilt, made him crouch down. The man was young, maybe in his 30s, wearing a police jacket. There was no blood visible, but his neck was twisted unnaturally, as if snapped. The radio on his belt hissed faintly with static. Arif stood frozen, unsure what to do. The village police post was 3 miles away. If he went there now, they'd question him, maybe even blame him. He had seen what they did to people who found bodies. Still, he couldn't leave the man there. He looked around. Empty fields, no sound, no movement. The only witness to this horror was the moon. Then a faint noise came from behind him, a slow, dragging shuffle. He turned sharply. Nothing, just the corn swaying slightly. Though the air was still, a shiver ran down his spine. Without another thought, he started running home, his sandals slapping against the dirt, his breath uneven. When he reached his small mud house at the edge of the village, he slammed the door and bolted it shut. Inside, the darkness pressed against the walls. His wife, Sita, stirred from sleep, asking what happened, but Arif couldn't speak. He only whispered one line, his voice trembling. "There's something wrong on the road tonight." Outside, far in the distance, the sound of the motorcycle's engine started again, even though no one had touched it. By morning, the sun had risen like any other day, golden lights spilling across the fields, the scent of dew mixing with dust. Arif sat on his charpai outside, staring blankly at the village road. His eyes were red from a sleepless night. Sita brought him tea, but he didn't touch it. His mind replayed the image again and again. The twisted neck, the flickering light, the radio's hiss. He told himself he would go back, just to see if it was real. Maybe his mind had played tricks in the dark. Maybe the man had just fallen. But deep down, he already knew the truth. No one twisted their neck that way and lived. After breakfast, Arif walked the dirt track again. The wind carried the faint sound of goats bleating and distant chatter from the fields. The motorcycle was gone. The tire marks were still there, pressed deep into the mud. But the body, the radio, everything had vanished. He stood there in disbelief. Even the broken stalks where the man had fallen seemed untouched, as if the earth had healed itself overnight. His heartbeat thundered in his chest. When he reached the small police post near the market, he found 2 constables half asleep on wooden chairs. He hesitated, then told them everything. They laughed, brushing him off. One of them muttered, "You've been drinking cheap tobacco again, Arif. No one drives that road. It's closed since last year's murder." Arif's face went pale. "Murder?" The constable yawned. "Yes, Sub-Inspector Bilal, found dead on that very road. Snapped neck. Case never solved." A cold wave of fear swept through him. The man he'd seen last night had been wearing a police jacket. Could it be the same one, or someone pretending to be him? When Arif returned home, the unease followed him like a shadow. His wife noticed it too, how he flinched at every sound, how his eyes kept wandering toward the fields. That night, he sat awake by the window, staring at the path under the moonlight. The world outside was quiet again, but then, in the faint distance, a red light blinked once. A headlight, the same as before, slowly appeared far down the dirt road. The sound of an engine echoed softly, low and uneven. Arif's pulse quickened. He rubbed his eyes, certain it couldn't be real. But it was there, moving closer, the light swaying gently like something being pulled instead of driven. And then, just as it neared the same spot as last night, the engine cut out and the light died. Only silence remained. The next morning carried a strange stillness that seemed to sit heavy over Walla. Even the birds were quiet. Arif tried to shake off the unease as he fetched water from the village well, but the reflection staring back at him in the rippling surface looked different. Pale, hollow-eyed, older. Rumors began to drift through the narrow dirt lanes. Some villagers whispered that strange lights were seen near the road again. Others claimed they heard the sputtering of an engine echoing through the fields around midnight. No one dared to check by noon. Two policemen arrived from the nearby station on a motorbike. They questioned people around the mill, asking about Arif by name. Someone had reported that he'd been seen wandering near the closed road the night before. Arif's chest tightened as he watched them from a distance. He knew what it meant when the police started asking questions in this village. It never ended well for the poor. Later that day, the head constable, a sharp-eyed man named Ralph, came to Arif's home. His boots left marks on the dusty floor as he scanned the small room. He spoke softly but carried the kind of authority that made even innocent men nervous. Arif told him everything. The fallen bike, the dead man, how it all vanished by morning. Ralph's expression didn't change. He only nodded slowly and said that Sub-Inspector Bilal, the officer Arif had possibly seen, had died exactly 1 year ago that same night, murdered while transporting evidence from a nearby case. His body had been found near that road, neck broken. The killer was never caught. Arif's heart sank. He swore he wasn't lying, that he'd seen the same man. But Ralph only placed a hand on his shoulder and said quietly, "Sometimes the dead don't rest easy here." That night, a heavy storm rolled in. Rain lashed against the roofs, and the wind howled through the trees. Arif lay awake again, listening to the thunder's distant growl. Sita slept fitfully beside him, mumbling prayers under her breath. Then, faintly through the sound of rain, came the unmistakable static of a radio. Arif sat up sharply. The noise came from outside, the same frequency hiss he'd heard from the policeman's belt. He rose slowly, heart pounding, and peered through the wooden shutters. There was nothing, only darkness broken by flashes of lightning. But when one flash illuminated the fields, he saw a silhouette standing beside the road. A man in a police jacket, soaked in rain, motionless. The next flash came, and the figure was gone. Arif's hands trembled as he backed away from the window. He could feel something unseen watching him through the storm, patient, cold, and waiting. The next morning, Arif's house smelled of damp earth and fear. He hadn't slept at all. His hands still trembled from what he'd seen outside, the silhouette in the storm. Sita noticed his pale face, but said nothing. In the village, silence was safer than curiosity. But by noon, curiosity found him anyway. Constable Ralph returned, this time without his usual politeness. "Arif," he said, "I need you to come with me. There's something you should see." They rode together toward the old road, the one that curved past the rice mill. The air was heavy, and crows lined the trees, cawing as if warning them. When they reached the bend, Ralph stopped the jeep and pointed to a patch of disturbed soil near the ditch. "A farmer found this early morning," he muttered. Said he saw old tire marks and a torn piece of police uniform buried halfway. Arif's breath hitched. The same road, the same turn, the same place where he'd seen the fallen motorbike. Ralph pulled a muddy piece of fabric from the ground. It was a fragment of a police jacket, the same color, Same insignia as the man Arif had described. We're reopening the case, Ralph said, staring hard at Arif. If you know something more, say it now, before the village starts whispering that you're cursed. Arif shook his head. I swear on my children, Sahib, I told you everything. I just saw him. He was alive that night. Ralph exhaled sharply. Alive, he repeated under his breath, almost as if testing the word. That evening, the village buzzed with talk. Some claimed Arif was lying to hide something. Others whispered that he was chosen, cursed to see what others could not. Children avoided passing his house, and the elders murmured prayers when he walked by. Unable to bear it, Arif went back to the road alone after sunset. He carried a lantern, its weak glow flickering against the fields. The rain had returned, soft at first, then heavier. As he knelt by the ditch, something metallic caught his eye, half buried in the mud. He dug it out with trembling fingers. It was an old police badge, corroded, still faintly engraved with S.I. Bilal Ahmed. But below it, lodged deeper in the wet soil, was something else, a small rusted box. Inside lay torn pages from a report, blood-stained, and a folded photograph of 3 men in uniform. Arif froze when he saw the third man in the photo. It was Ralph. His breath hitched. The lightning flashed again, and for an instant, he thought he saw a man standing across the road, drenched, head tilted, eyes glowing faintly through the rain. The dead policeman. The wind howled, and Arif stumbled backward. When he looked again, the figure was gone. But the badge in his hand had grown cold, so cold it burned his skin that he dropped it, heart pounding. As realization struck him like thunder, Sub-Inspector Bilal hadn't died in an accident. He'd been betrayed, and now he wanted Arif to uncover who buried the truth. The rain did not stop that night. It drummed endlessly against the tin roof as if the sky itself refused to let go of its grief. Arif sat on the edge of his bed, soaked to the bone, the rusted badge and photograph lying before him. The faces of the 3 policemen stared back, one alive, one dead, and one standing in between truth and feared. He couldn't tell Sita what he'd found. She already looked at him like a man half-haunted, half-lost. So, when she finally drifted to sleep, he lit the lantern again and stepped outside. The wind had quieted, the village asleep under a black, starless sky. Only the sound of frogs echoed through the wet fields as he walked toward the old road. Every step felt heavier, as though the soil itself wanted him to turn back. When he reached the bend, the mist had thickened into a low, creeping fog. His lantern barely cut through it. The same patch of ground where he had found the badge now seemed disturbed again. Fresh footprints, larger, deeper than his own, leading into the field. Bilal, he whispered. The fog shifted. Somewhere ahead, he heard the faint growl of a motorbike engine, but distant, distorted, like an echo from a different time. Then came the flash of headlights. Arif shielded his eyes, heart hammering. The sound grew louder. Tires screeched. A crash. Then silence. When he looked up again, a motorbike lay in the mud ahead, just as before. Its headlight flickered weakly, and beside it, a body. Arif stepped closer. The man on the ground was wearing a soaked police uniform, the name tag barely visible under the mud. S.I. Bilal Ahmed. But the face, it wasn't just a corpse. The eyes were open, staring at him. Arif. The voice was wet and gurgling, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. You saw it happen. You saw the road, remember? Arif stumbled backward, clutching the lantern. I didn't. I don't know what happened. You do. You saw them bury me. You saw them run. Images flashed through Arif's mind like shards of broken glass. 2 men dragging a limp body, shovels, headlights. Ralph's voice shouting something he couldn't make out. That he fell to his knees, gripping his head. No, I didn't see. A hand, cold and soaked, grabbed his wrist. Bilal's body sat up slowly, bones cracking, mud sliding from his face. They left me to rot. But you, Arif, you will show them where the road ends. The lantern shattered on the ground. The flame went out. Darkness swallowed everything except the dim, flickering headlight. And through that trembling light, Arif saw dozens of shapes emerging from the mist, outlines of other men, other uniforms, faces pale and waterlogged, their eyes hollow. The road of the dead stretched endlessly behind them, and it was calling him forward. The morning came too quietly, the kind of silence that hums beneath the skin, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Arif woke up on the cold floor of his hut, soaked in mud and fear. His clothes smelled of rain and earth, and his hands trembled as though something had drained the warmth out of them. The lantern was shattered. The photograph was gone. He didn't remember walking home. Only the fog and the eyes, dozens of them, staring through him like he was one of them. Outside, the village looked normal again. Chickens clucked, the well creaked, and Sita was kneeling by the stove, cooking breakfast. But her face, pale, uneasy, lifted the moment he stepped out. "Where did you go?" she asked, voice low. "I woke up and you weren't here." The rain stopped at midnight. Arif didn't answer. He looked past her, toward the road beyond their small yard. From there, he could see it, faint drag marks leading from the direction of the bend toward the fields. That he muttered, "Someone came back last night." Sita frowned. "Who?" He didn't know how to say it. The name Bilal Ahmed burned on his tongue, but every time he tried to speak it, his throat tightened, as if something didn't want him to. Then a knock came at the door. 3 slow, heavy knocks. Arif froze. The same rhythm echoed in his skull, the one from last night, when the fog had whispered his name. Sita walked to the door, but Arif caught her wrist. "Don't." The knock came again, louder this time. From outside, a deep, muffled voice said, "Arif, it's Ralph." The police officer. The same one from the photograph. Arif opened the door. Ralph stood there, drenched, his uniform dirty, boots caked in mud. His face was calm, too calm. "I need to talk," he said. "It's about Bilal." Sita excused herself silently, stepping away as the two men sat. Ralph lit a cigarette, the smoke curling toward the ceiling. "You found his badge, didn't you?" he said. Arif nodded. "You weren't supposed to." That single line froze the air in the room. Arif's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" He died in an accident, didn't he?" Ralph leaned forward. "You think that was an accident? You think that road just swallows people for no reason?" Arif's hands tightened on his knees. "Then tell me what happened." Ralph looked him dead in the eye. "We buried him there." For a second, Arif couldn't breathe. Bilal. He was going to expose something. The land deal, the bribes, all of it. The DPO wanted it silenced. "We were ordered to make it disappear." He took a shaky drag from his cigarette. "We buried him near the old banyan tree. But last night, his voice cracked. The grave was open." Arif's heart dropped. "You saw it?" Ralph nodded. "Not just that. Someone had placed 3 lanterns in a circle around it. And footprints, yours." "I didn't." Arif started, but stopped when Ralph's expression changed. The officer's gaze shifted past him to the doorway leading to the back of the hut. His eyes widened. The cigarette fell from his fingers. "Arif," he whispered, "who's standing behind you?" Arif turned slowly. In the dim corner, where the light barely reached, stood a man soaked in mud. His police badge glimmered faintly on his chest. "Ralph," the voice said, wet, heavy, echoing from the walls. "You left me on that road." Ralph screamed and stumbled backward, his chair crashing to the floor. The figure stepped forward, water dripping from its uniform, eyes glowing pale and lifeless. Sita ran in, shouting Arif's name. But her scream turned into a choked sob when she saw it too. The ghost of Bilal reached out a trembling hand toward Ralph, and the air around them grew colder than ice. The walls groaned. The lantern flame blew out. In the blackness, Ralph's voice broke into a plea. "Forgive me. Please, Bilal, forgive me." Then came the whisper. "You buried the truth. Now the truth will bury you." A sound like rushing wind filled the hut, and when the light returned, Ralph was gone. Only muddy footprints remained, leading back out toward the fog, and in the doorway, the same whisper returned, softer now, almost gentle. Arif, it's your turn to dig. The morning after Ralph's disappearance, the village woke to a silence so unnatural that even the crows avoided the rooftops. No one had seen the police officer since the night before. Only Arif knew what had happened, or what he thought had happened. But even his memory was fractured, splintered between what he'd witnessed and what his mind could bear to accept. He sat outside the hut with his head bowed, staring at the damp soil between his feet. The world felt thinner now, like something had shifted behind the visible. The fog hadn't lifted completely. It lingered at the edges of the fields as if waiting for him. Sita watched from the doorway. She hadn't spoken much since last night. There was a distance in her eyes, a quiet fear that had replaced the warmth she once held for him. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind made her flinched by midday. A few villagers came asking questions. Ralph's motorbike was found near the old banyan tree, its engine still warm, its seat smeared with mud and streaks of something darker. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, just the open grave again, gaping like a mouth that had never closed. Arif followed them to the site, though every step felt heavier than the last. The air there was thick with moisture and decay. The banyan loomed tall, its twisted roots crawling into the ground like the fingers of something ancient and alive. The grave was indeed open, deep, freshly disturbed that Arif's pulse hammered in his chest as he knelt near the edge. He remembered Ralph's words. You buried him there. And now the spot where Bilal Ahmed once lay was empty. Something glimmered in the dirt, a shard of metal. He reached for it and brushed off the mud. It was a badge, not Bilal's, but Ralph's. The same one that had hung on his chest hours before he vanished. The villagers murmured in confusion, crossing themselves in fear. One of them, an old man with a trembling voice, whispered, "This ground is cursed. It doesn't hold the dead, it releases them." Arif felt his stomach twist. His hands shook as he stood. He wanted to speak, to tell them what he had seen, but the words died in his throat as the crowd dispersed. Arif remained. Alone by the grave, he stared into the hollow darkness below. He thought he saw a movement, a shimmer like water reflecting light from somewhere deep within. He leaned closer. The reflection changed. It was his own face staring back, but pale, lifeless, eyes wide open as if submerged under the soil. He stumbled backward, falling onto the wet earth. The echo of whispering filled the air again, faint, layered, like 100 voices speaking from beneath the ground. He couldn't make out the words, only the rhythm of sorrow and accusation. Sita found him hours later, still kneeling by the grave, eyes blank. She pulled him away, whispering his name over and over, but he didn't respond until they were halfway home. Then, in a low, trembling voice, he said, "It's not done. He's not alone down there." That night, Arif couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The ticking of the clock, the rustle of the curtains, the slow, distant hum of the wind outside. And then he heard it again, 3 knocks on the door that he didn't move. Neither did Sita. The knocks came again, deliberate, patient. Finally, he rose, his body numb with dread, and opened the door. No one was there. Only a shallow trail of mud leading away toward the fields. He followed it, barefoot, drawn by something beyond reason. The trail led him past the well, across the barren stretch, and stopped near the banyan. But this time, the grave was closed again, perfectly sealed. No sign of disturbance. Then, from behind him, a whisper brushed his ear. "You look too deep." He turned sharply. Nothing, just fog curling low over the ground. But in the distance, faintly visible in the mist, were 3 silhouettes standing side by side. One was Ralph, one was Bilal, and the third, he realized with a chill that sank into his bones, was him. The fog thickened, swallowing the field whole that be wide dawn. Only Sita remained, calling his name into the empty air. By the time the sun rose, Arif was nowhere to be found. Sita searched for him through every path, every corner of the village, calling his name until her voice broke. The others refused to help now, too afraid to go near the banyan, too haunted by the stories that had begun to spread like wildfire through the village. They said the ground near the banyan had turned soft again, as if something beneath kept shifting. That on certain nights, a faint cry could be heard, not from above, but from within the earth. Sita went anyway, barefoot, trembling, clutching a small lantern as the morning fog still clung to the fields. She followed the same path Arif had taken, and soon she saw it. The tree, the grave mound perfectly sealed, yet somehow pulsing faintly, as if the earth itself was breathing. She knelt beside it, pressing her hand against the damp soil. It was warm, too warm. Her pulse raced as a whisper slipped through the silence, her husband's voice, soft, distant, calling her name. Sita? She jerked back, nearly dropping the lantern. Her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement, but the field was still. Only the tree above, its roots gnarled and thick, twisting deep into the soil as if feeding on whatever was buried beneath. Behind her, someone coughed. She turned sharply. An old man stood there, the same one who had spoken about the curse before. His eyes were hollow, but his tone was steady. "Child," he said, pointing to the tree. "That land is older than our dead. What sleeps there isn't what we think it is." Sita frowned, whispering, "Then what is it?" He looked down, his voice breaking. "Something that remembers every soul laid upon it. When a grave opens there, it's not to release, it's to replace." The word struck her like a blow. Her mind flashed with the memory of Ralph's badge, the vanishing of Bilal's body, and now Arif's disappearance. The soil wasn't emptying, it was taking. Sita stood frozen, realization carving into her chest. She backed away slowly, but the ground shifted under her feet. A muffled sound came from below, like breathing. Then fingers. Pale, clay-covered fingers clawed up from the soil. She screamed, stumbling backward as the ground split open. From the darkness below, something crawled out. Not Arif, but his shape, his clothes, his face, except it was wrong. Its skin was pale as ash, eyes blank, and when it opened its mouth, a deep growl escaped, a sound that didn't belong to the living. The old man ran, shouting prayers into the air, but Sita couldn't move. The creature tilted its head, studying her as if remembering what it used to be. Then, in a broken whisper, it said, "You called me back." She dropped the lantern and ran. The creature didn't chase, just watched, sinking slowly back into the soil as the fire from the lantern caught on the dry roots. Flames began to lick up the bark, spreading fast. The banyan burned, its twisted limbs glowing orange in the fog, smoke curling into the dawn sky to BY midday. Half the village had gathered, staring at the charred remains of the ancient tree. No one dared to go near. The grave beneath it had collapsed, leaving only a wide, blackened hollow. But there was no sign of Arif, or anything else. That night, as Sita sat alone in the empty hut, she thought she saw movement through the window. A figure standing near the edge of the field, its body faintly outlined by the moonlight. It raised its hand slowly, the same way Arif used to when he came home from work. Then it vanished. The wind carried the faint smell of burnt earth, and with it, a whisper, barely audible, "Not done yet." For days after the fire, the village smelled of char and damp earth. The banyan was gone, its ashes scattered across the wind, but peace never returned. At night, the wind carried something new, a rhythm, faint but constant, like footsteps circling the houses when everyone slept. Sita barely slept at all. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Arif's pale face emerging from the soil, those lifeless eyes remembering her name. The sound of his voice, The wrongness of it had burned itself into her mind. She had moved back into her old home on the outskirts, far from the banyan field. But even there, she couldn't escape the strange things that followed. She would wake up to muddy footprints inside her kitchen. The smell of smoke lingered though no fire had been lit. And sometimes, when she passed by the mirror above her sink, she swore she saw another reflection standing slightly behind her, still, patient, watching. The rest of the villagers avoided her now. They said the curse had chosen her, that whatever was under that tree had marked her when she touched the soil. Only one man dared to speak to her, the same old villager who had warned her before. He came quietly one afternoon, bringing a cloth bag that jingled faintly. "It's not over," he said, eyes hollow. "You burned the tree, but you didn't destroy what fed it." Sita frowned. Then what was it feeding on? He untied the bag and poured out what was inside: rusted trinkets, buttons, fragments of bone, old government tags, and nameplates, all blackened with age. "These were buried there long before any of us," he whispered. "The roots grew through graves, through the bodies of soldiers, workers, children, every soul this village forgot. The ground isn't haunted by one spirit, it's haunted by memory itself." Sita stared, a cold weight settling in her stomach. "And now," the old man pointed at her chest, "now it remembers you. That night, she locked her doors, lit candles, and tried to stay awake. But sometime past midnight, exhaustion won. When she awoke, the candles had burned down to wax puddles. The air was heavy with smoke, and something else. She heard a soft, scraping sound coming from the back door, slow, repeated, like fingernails dragging against wood. She held her breath. Then, a low voice whispered through the crack, "You burned me." She froze. The voice was Arif's, faint, broken, but familiar. She stepped back as the latch began to lift on its own. Her heart hammered in her chest. The door creaked open an inch, letting in a rush of cold air. And there he stood, not the monster she had seen in the field. Not quite human either. His body was covered in ash and cracked skin, smoke rising faintly from his shoulders. His eyes were no longer empty. They glowed with something alive. Something wrong. He didn't move closer, just looked at her, as if caught between life and death. Then he whispered, "You should have left it sleeping." The ground beneath her floor groaned. The walls trembled. From outside came the sound of shifting earth, like thousands of tiny bones grinding together. Sita turned and ran toward the door, but the old man was already there, shouting prayers. "It's waking again," he screamed. "The earth remembers the fire." From the fields, smoke rose, but this time it wasn't from burning wood. It was from the ground itself, from the graves beneath the ashes. Shapes began to move under the soil, pressing upward, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The curse hadn't died with the banyan. It had spread. The earth of the entire village was alive now, restless, breathing. Sita fell to her knees, the sound of voices rising from beneath the soil, all whispering the same words, over and over, like a forgotten prayer. "Return what was taken." The old man shouted for her to run, but she couldn't move. She looked toward Arif again, but he was gone. Only the faint outline of his footprints remained, leading back toward the burning fields. The ground pulsed once, then fell silent. The smoke cleared, and the whispers stopped. But in that silence, Sita realized something even worse. Every house, every yard, every path in that village had turned black underfoot, the same color as the soil that had buried the dead for centuries. The earth had claimed them all. Morning came, but the light brought no comfort. The sun hung low and pale, and the village seemed drained of all color, as if it, too, had been pulled into the curse's breath. The wind was still, the crows silent. Even the cattle refused to move. Sita stood on the edge of the fields, staring at the blackened ground. The banyan was gone, the graves had collapsed, and the once green fields now looked scorched, lifeless, dead. Yet beneath it all, she could still feel it, the faint vibration under her feet, like something vast shifting in its sleep. Behind her, the old man appeared again, holding a torch. His hands trembled as he spoke. It's not the tree. It was never the tree. The roots were only veins. The heart lies below. What heart? She whispered, afraid of the answer. He pointed toward the well. The one the villagers had stopped using years ago after a child had vanished inside it. The stones around its rim were cracked and burned, smoke still curling faintly from its mouth. They built the village over what they shouldn't have touched. A city buried by the flood centuries ago. The dead below still remember the world that forgot them. Sita stepped closer, her body shaking. She looked down into the well. At first, all she saw was darkness. Then, faintly, a flicker of light, like a pulse deep below, red and slow. She dropped a pebble. It never hit bottom. Then came the sound. Not the whisper of ghosts, not wind, but breathing. Slow, deep, ancient. The earth inhaled and exhaled beneath her. The old man backed away, muttering prayers. It's awake. From the edges of the field, the soil began to shift. Hands emerged, brittle and pale, hundreds of them, pushing through the dirt, reaching toward the sky. The ground cracked, groaning like an old wound reopening. Sita stumbled back as one of the hands grabbed her ankle. It wasn't rotted, it was cold and strong. She screamed, pulling free, falling to the ground. All around her, the village erupted in chaos. The old houses trembling, their foundations splitting as something enormous stirred beneath. Through the cracks in the soil, she saw light. Red, pulsing veins of fire stretching beneath the land. The earth's heart was beating. The old man shouted, "It's reclaiming the living." Sita knew there was nowhere to run. She could feel the pull beneath her, dragging her toward the well, toward the hollow center of the curse. Smoke burst from the ground, and the sky turned gray as ash. And then, through the haze, she saw him, Arif, standing beside the well, untouched by fire, his skin clean, his eyes calm. He looked alive. For a moment, she wanted to believe he was saved. But as he raised his hand, she saw the truth. His fingers were blackened at the tips, like charred roots. He smiled faintly. You can't burn what was born from earth. The ground beneath her feet gave way. She fell to her knees, clutching at the dirt, screaming as the soil turned liquid, pulling her down inch by inch. The old man tried to reach her, but the same unseen force dragged him backward. His torch fell, flames spreading in circles around the well. And still, that heartbeat continued. Deep, steady. The earth was alive. Sita's last sight was of Arif standing over the collapsing ground, his form fading like smoke. His voice echoed as she sank beneath the soil. Now we all return home. Then silenced by dawn, the entire village was gone. From above, only a field of ash remained, flat, lifeless, still. The well was sealed with hardened soil, as if it had never existed. Years later, travelers passing through the valley spoke of the place. They said the air there was colder, the ground softer. Some nights, when fog covered the fields, they heard faint voices calling for help, rising from below, but none ever stayed long enough to listen. Because if you stood too still on that soil, it began to breathe. End of story. The village beneath new moon.